There he is.
There he is. What's up?
Hey, brother.
What's up, brother? How you
We
doing?
got it going. I'm good. I'm good. Sorry,
I
I messaged you and then I grabbed another call. I figured I'm just trying to
yeah.
get things done.
Yeah,
So
right. You know, you're good. This whole podcasting thing is like brand new to me too, so
I thought
don't
so. Am I
worry
your
about
first guest?
it. Yes, sir.
Okay. All right then.
Yes, sir. What my coach does like a podcast, and I was like, you know what? Maybe I should start just trying to have people on. He had you on. Tom Schuster is his name.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Tom's a good
I'm gonna
cat.
do,
Yeah.
I'm gonna do like a little intro, and then I'll get into the podcast. So,
Okay.
what's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Iron or the Intentional Iron podcast. I don't have the name of my podcast remembered yet, but welcome back to another episode of the Intentional Iron podcast. Today, I have a very special guest with me, the Dr. Scott Stevenson. How you doing this morning, brother?
I'm good. I just noticed. I don't know if it'll show up. I have the dog father as my
Yeah, I seen the
my.
dog. I saw that. Yeah, the
I
dog.
do that. We do use Riverside for my own podcast, and I change the name every once in a while just to give
Yeah,
Scott
that's what I
McNally
yeah,
a laugh. But it
yeah.
doesn't show up, so I think that's
Yeah, I
fine.
love
That's
that.
also my self-given nickname. I'm good,
Yeah,
man.
so
Thanks for having me on
for,
here. I appreciate it.
yeah, first of all, I just want to like thank you so much for coming on. Like I even have on my little bookshelf over here.
Oh, there it
I've
is.
got the book. I've got the book. Yeah. So if you
Cool.
don't mind, just off the rip, just give the people a little bit about who you are, because I think like the demographic that my audience is isn't really going to know who you are, which is very sad to say, because like the young and upcoming guys don't really haven't looked back into your like group of people. So just kind of give people like an introduction to who you are and what got you into bodybuilding, and just kind of the whole beginning process of it.
I'm just like the people who are listening, except I've been at this for 30 or 40 years. So I'm
Right.
you when if you're still at it 40 years later.
Yeah.
I started training. I'd like to say when I was 11. I think it might have been before then. My dad had a weight set up in the attic above our garage, and I started sneaking in there. Uh, I think maybe I was 9 or 10,
Yeah.
and I would just go up there, and there was a poster illustrating all the exercises that you could do. As a DP
Hmm.
was the brand. I don't think they're even in existence
Yeah.
anymore. And I would just do 3 sets of 10 for every exercise. Every time I trained, everything
Yeah.
was there. So it was like 30
Yeah.
exercises. I would just do them all.
Hmm.
And so I'm just kind of a regular meathead gym
Hmm.
rat guy who was lucky enough to figure out, I think I can make a living at this. I can
Yeah.
take my curiosity. So along the way, I ended up getting a master's degree and a PhD because I wanted to teach and be a professor. So I was a college professor for a while.
Okay.
So I sort of made myself, I wanted to be the world's greatest personal trainer initially. That was sort of my goal. And then I
That's
realized,
a good goal. Yeah.
I mean, I say that facetiously, right? But this is back in the
Right.
90s. So, I mean, I started training in
Yeah.
81, just to give
Uh-huh.
people an idea.
Uh, yeah.
Graduate
Right.
school in the 90s, college professor early 2000s. I've owned a gym. Along the way, I became a licensed acupuncturist.
Hmm.
Again, part of my mission to try to help people, right? To be
That's
quote
awesome.
unquote a
Yeah.
healer. Yeah. So that's always been what it's been about for me, is to try to help people be better. The thing I probably will mention again later in the podcast, if we get through this giant outline you set up, is that I try to teach people to fish rather than just give them a fish. And I think that's become a more and more of a rare thing over the course of the time that I've been involved in bodybuilding since the 80s, reading the muscle magazines, et cetera, et cetera. So I try to fuse together the Western scientific notions and keep up to date
Hmm.
with that, with 40 plus years of experience. And
Awesome.
literally,
Yeah,
I'm,
for
I'm
sure.
55 now, so I've been doing this for almost 45 years,
That's
coming up
that's that's
here.
awesome. That's so cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what got you into like really being interested in like the nuts and bolts of it all? Because like a lot of people that get into bodybuilding don't really get like in depth as you are. Because like in
hmm
your book, like you go so in depth with like everything. Like what got you into like being interested in like the nuts and bolts of it?
I think it's just partly my nature.
Okay.
One, I literally, it sounds kind of bizarre, but as long as I can remember when I was a kid, I wanted to do two things. I wanted to lift weights and do martial arts. And there was no martial arts opportunity in my hometown. There's not a single dojo. I don't think there's any place even now. You can probably take karate classes or something at the YMCA, but that was just not available. So I started doing weight training like in 8th grade, but I was training up in the sneak up to my dad's thing. So, and I've just always been a curious kid too.
Okay.
And I, my brain works all right. I think I have a decent noggin, so that helps. Like, if you have a hard time understanding things, and it's not typically very rewarding to understand things, but the more you understand things, the more rewarding it becomes to continue to understand things more and more so. So as a curious kid, I still got this curiosity. You will never even scratch the surface really on what there is to be known, no matter what it is that you're looking into. I think this is what happens when people become experts, is that at least if they're being honest and not just ridiculous, egotistical maniacs, is they realize that the more they know, the less they actually realize that they actually know.
Seriously.
Really,
Like, you get more curious, and then like you get into like rabbit holes of certain things, and you're just like, I actually don't know anything. This is actually crazy. It's like you never know. But yeah, so one thing I wanted to go over with you for sure is fortitude training. So if you could give someone like a breakdown of what fortitude training, like a nutshell, just so like someone who's new coming into like what was fortitude training, and just kind of like an overview of it.
So that's my training system. I think the book's about 10 years old now, coming up on 10 years maybe. And it's a recipe. So there's very components. The thing, like one of the questions we might get to, is that I took various components, ingredients in a recipe, and created a program based on the things that I thought was important, based on the science, and that's addressed in the book, the scientific research up to that point, and the scientific perspective, but also based on my own personal experience in working with clients. I got my first personal trainer certificate in 1993. So probably a lot of the folks weren't even born. They weren't even a twinkle in their daddy's eye when I was already training people in the gym. So basically what I did and I looking at the landscape, at least at that time, there wasn't a lot of programming that was focused on higher frequency regimes. So I realize now, and I knew that at the same time, some people will benefit from lower frequency, maybe a little more volume in each workout, or vice versa. Some people do better. Can matter, depend on the muscle group or what have you. But I intentionally developed fortitude training the way it stands in the book now as being focused on higher frequency. And there's some basic principles there. First of all, progressive overload. That's just that's sort of the forgotten principle with the science-based training, is that you can do all these things right, but if you keep doing the same exercise with the same weight, you can only get so far by learning how to execute better, and then eventually progressive overload comes into play. The thing that is really, really, I think, very undervalued too is auto-regulation, and that's a key component of fortitude training. So, and this is the nature of thing. This addresses some of the things you wanted to talk about. Is when I first started competing in the 90s too. So I competed for almost 25 years, like 40 shows, something like that. But people didn't use coaches. There's like Chad Nichols was out there, and Vince Garanda was kind of the coach, and Joe Weider, trainer of the champions. Well, but never one had a coach. And if you saw another bodybuilder at the gym, you're like, oh shit, hey, you're like you're one of me, like you're part of the subculture here.
Right.
And everyone was just talking amongst themselves and figuring it out. You had personal trainers maybe that would guide people. Most of those trainers weren't putting people on the stage. So now we've shifted towards people using coaches, people buying programs that tell them explicitly what to do. And that whole feature of learning yourself, know thyself, is an important principle for training and for life, I think.
Yeah, right.
And learning how to auto-regulate and knowing when to pull back, knowing when to take a deload, knowing when to change exercises or use a different exercise. Those are all things built into the fortitude training. So I have, for instance, and this fits alongside the principle of biological interindividuality, or just simply individuality, that we're all a little bit different. Some people can handle massive training volumes. A lot of the best pros, the more you can train, the greater the stimulus, but you still have to recover. Some pros can get away with that. That's part of the reason why they're probably bigger than the average person.
Right.
So I've got numerous features in fortitude training that address individuality and the auto regulation. So there's two versions. There's one that's you train about 3 times a week. There's one version you can even train a muscle group 4 times a week. There's a basic and a turbo. More important than that, really, there are 3 volume tiers. So you look, there's an overview sheet. It's free to download. Anyone could come and get this. It won't make much sense unless you read the book. But the idea is that it lays out for at least someone entry into the program. If lower volume is the best you can recover from, then you use volume tier 1. If you can have more volume 2, and then also that you would auto regulate. So you might have a week where, I'm working overtime the entire time. My wife is sick, my kid is sick, and I'm going to have to be home doing things I wouldn't. So you don't use volume tier 2, you go down to volume tier 1 because there's no point. You auto regulate and adjust your volume based on that. So life has a tendency to get in the way, and being able to auto regulate and adjust, even in the way that the periodization occurs. There's a basic periodization scheme in Fortitude training where you blast. I've stolen these terms from Dante Trudell. You blast and you try to progressively overload. That's when you're getting after it. And then you take a cruise, and that's basically a taper, as would be used in a lot of different athletics, where you reduce the frequency, still train hard, and reduce the volume. And basically, it's a very somewhat structured deload. So when you take that deload, if you're not going to make it through the next 3 or 4 weeks, and you're going to just have to sandbag and lollygag your way through the training, and take the deload. Right. So there's progressive overload, there's auto regulation, there's different volume tiers. More of the auto. There's another one of the principles is that there's different rep ranges where hypertrophy can occur. There's a study with postmenopausal women. This hasn't been explored terribly in the science, but anyone who's been at it for a while knows that this is the case. Some people benefit more from higher reps, maybe even for certain muscle groups than others. So in order to address that, I've got 3 different set types. And those are, we don't need to go into those details, but there's heavier sets, there's sort of a more moderate loading set, and there's a higher rep, lower load set type. And within the ranges of reps or the way those sets are executed, you can either train heavier or lighter. Someone who just needs to be train as brutally heavily as possible, you're not just going to do sets of 6 all the time, having some variety, which is an important training principles in there. So the idea is that you would progress, at least you would move forward within those rep ranges. And the higher rep range set type is called a pump set, is also there to adjust the relative training inroad that you take. So when you come to those set types in your weekly plan, if you're obliterated, you don't obliterate yourself even further necessarily. So you can adjust that. And this is just old school, basic, common sense training. And you need to learn how to do that. And the logbook, of course, plays the role it tells you whether you're moving forward.
I think that's one of the biggest things that's missing now is like the logbook and like being able to track that and like you keep saying, like auto regulate yourself. Like if you don't know when to like make that adjustment, you just like hammer yourself. It's like, yeah, obviously that's not going to be, a good thing. And I think people, especially nowadays, just try and give like blanket, like black and white, do this many sets and do this many reps, when it's like for me for example, like I think that like super high reps on like shoulders, for example, is really good, but like I wouldn't do super high reps for like 20 plus reps for like back, for example. It's like you have to figure it out. It's like when people ask like, what's the best rep range for X, Y, and Z, it's like there kind of isn't one. There's like what could be better for you, could be better for whoever. Like for me, I kind of like doing like a higher reps on like a leg press, like for like 20 reps. And some people are like, that just wouldn't work for me. Well, it's like, well, it's such a lost like art and like aspect of it all, like the individuality of it all. It's like because people just want like the answer, and it's like, yeah, there kind of isn't. It's like it's like all the podcasts, or there's a podcast I listen to called the One Rep Podcast, and like everything, every like gear question, every training question, it's like, well, it kind of depends. And that's like everything within bodybuilding. It's like, well, it just kind of depends. And I think people just got to remember that everybody's different, like in every aspect.
Yeah, there's outliers in most studies. You see, the thing that's sometimes forgotten, and I mention this all the time, but I think it bears repeating, so I'll say it again. But studies basically are asking a certain question. If we sample from a population of people, and we know there's some normal, the presumption is that there's a normal distribution there, right? And we compare training in the lengthened position versus training with normal range of motion, or we compare rep tempo, or we compare rep range, load, whatever it might be. You might find, let's say that in one of those cases, one condition outperforms another. But basically there's two normal curves that are overlapping. And the science would say we could expect, if we took people or one person out of that sample population, men aged 20 to 38, let's say, with at least 1 year of resistance exercise training experience, what have you, we would expect that it's possibly that this is going to happen. But that doesn't necessarily answer the question from the individual level. For the individual, there will be people, and you see this when you actually look at the data and read past the abstracts, you'll see that there are individuals, if they do a crossover, if they train one leg one way, or just if you look at those people's data, that person, not everyone is better off with the one training intervention that seemed to be beneficial in that study. It just shows you that they're, statistically speaking, and the statistical, there's various ways you can do the statistics, but in the inferential statistics, the idea would be that we have sort of like this agreed upon relative probability that this would not happen by chance, and then then we say that this is the case. But it's not black and white. It's a distribution curve of gray, really.
Yeah.
So it may not matter for you. It may not make a difference. Like there's non-responders to aerobic exercise, to resistance exercise, to creatine, to all sorts. Some people just don't grow, and some people they got to look at the dumbbell rack and they will grow really well. And they can do whatever the hell they want to do.
Yeah, that's a good point.
But I'll say, like, the thing that I tell clients this all the time. If you just take basic exercises, train with a reasonable rep range, whatever, 6 to 12 to 15 reps, something like that, and you double your strength on all those things over the next 4 or 5 years, it's going to manifest in your physique, and to some degree. It will vary. Some people won't look as big as you might think they would. Others will grow like weeds and not be as strong as they look like they are. But that's going to get you somewhere, regardless of all the peripheral things, the bells and whistles you might throw in there. Get brutally strong with basic bodybuilding exercises and bodybuilding rep ranges to where you're the strongest dude in your gym. And there's almost no denying it. It's like, okay, well, shit, now I'm incline pressing 405 pounds and my chest doesn't look good. Then there's some things you can do, but you're going to still be incredibly impressive compared to what you used to look like and compared to what most people look like. So that's like the first step. Get as strong as you can doing bodybuilding training. Be as impressive as you can, and then you can play with the other things.
Yeah, I think especially like people around my age, like 19, 20s, just getting into bodybuilding. That's what they want to do, like all the new cool science-based lifts, and it's like you're just making it so what I tell like some clients I work with is like this could be like a diet perspective or training perspective. It's like you're using so much mental like power to put into your training right now. Like, I want to do this single arm attached to my elbow pull down. It's like we could just do a normal lat pull down, and if you focus on doing a little bit more each week, you are not going to have to put so much mental thinking into what you're doing. You can just move the weight and just progress like that. It's like you're trying to do so many things, and that's what I tell people like with diets and stuff. It's like you're trying to think of all these things you need to be eating every day. It's like, how about we just like pick like a couple proteins, a couple carbs, and then just leave it at that. So you don't have to put so much thinking into it. It's like just nail the foundations of the diet, nail the easy stuff, make it easy. What's that? Keep it
simple, stupid. Yeah.
Keep it simple, stupid. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just keep it simple, because the more stress you add to everything in your life with this whole process, it's like it's just going to become harder to sustain that. And if you can't sustain it, you're not going to do it for a long time. If you're not going to do it for a long time, you're not going to make results. So it's like just keep it simple. Just keep it simple.
There's a catch-22 that like this phenomenon. You're not obviously not the first person to run up against. This is what I've been seeing evolving for literally decades now. It's so in the world we live in, kids are spending. Oop, I lost your video. Oh, you're still there. Okay, it's all good. I just want to make sure I could keep on talking. Can you hear me? Okay. Okay. Recording's good. I can keep going. Oh yeah. Yeah. Maybe you want to clip this section out. So we live in a world now, especially with social media and phones, that was extremely different than what I grew up with. Right. When I started training in my attic, or I'd go to gym, like no one cared what I was doing. The environment around me, the people around me were very normal looking people. There were some badasses, of course, but I had a completely different view of the world around me. And the amount of information flowing in that was visually gratifying and distracting was very, very different. And the quantity of information was literally minimal. I was just reading the muscle magazines and paying attention. I didn't have a bunch of things to try to tell me what could or would have been better. And we have this paralysis by analysis phenomenon. We have this paradox of choice issue that comes into play. There's so many possibilities. Everyone's telling you, because this is what influencers a lot of times trying to do, is they're trying to get clicks, they're trying to get followers, they're trying to be unique and tell you things that you're missing out on. Look across, probably everyone's algorithm is like this, and every video you see is like, the 5 things you're not doing to be massive, right? And you must read this now, right? And you're going to die tomorrow if you don't click on this link, right? So, sure. Okay.
You still here?
I'm still here.
Beautiful. Okay, cool. But
okay,
yeah,
it works.
Go ahead. Go ahead. What you're saying.
So yeah, I'm kind of developing a little bit of a thesis here. So what that means is that the threshold for stimulus is raised. Because as opposed to, like I'm thinking about going to the gym, and I go to the gym, and finally I'm in the gym and they're the guys I'm training with. You can spend all day long on your phone looking at Photoshop, video shopped pictures of massive bodybuilders, completely distorting your perception of what you can possibly achieve, and overflowing and flooding your brain with stimuli that are feeding your reward center of your brain, elevating your dopamine, etc., so that when it comes down, it's just doing the training. That's not sexy or exciting. Just pick out some basic foods and just doing the work. There's no reward that comes from that. It's not that much fun anymore, because you've been like, you're literally in a bodybuilding amusement park all day long with your phone and with computers, what have you. And then when you have to go and just get on your own little ride, right? You've been riding around virtually on the best roller coasters and the rides that are flipping you upside down. You do all this cool shit. You're getting all this awesome stuff. Beautiful women that probably are photoshopped. Guys that are just, there's one giant after the other. It's just complete fantasy land. And then you're going to go in the gym and like, what is this, And I'm just going to like do 3 sets of barbell incline press, and then I'm going to do lat pull downs and bend over. Like, that's no fun. That's so sexy, what that means is like, yes, I want to do give me some cuffs, and let's do some partials, and let's do some fun, funky stuff, because the regular training is not that enjoyable anymore. And I think the key thing that folks maybe who are listening, if any of this resonates with them, is to realize, oh shit, there's a manipulation that's intentionally happening. This is why people become addicted to their phones, basically. And they freak out when they don't have their phones, and they have phones right next to their bed, and they wake up, the first thing they do is they check their phone, what have you, is that there are outside forces, and some of these could be the influencers, not that they're dastardly, evildoers that are trying to ruin your life, but the environment that's influencing your perspective on bodybuilding could also be at the same time destroying the intrinsic value that you could get from bodybuilding, because it's badass just to go in there and get after it in a very basic way. And there's so many life lessons that can be learned just from developing consistency, learning how to persevere through difficult sets, where the pain says stop, and you say no,
Exactly.
you're just pain. Pain,
Exactly.
it will come and go. My intention here is actually to create pain and discomfort, because the more I do so, the stronger the stimulus. So to have the perspective, there's sort of a, not to get whole conspiracy theory, but there's something to this, is that like the online virtual world is conspiring to control your brain to a certain degree. And then it influences your activities and how you perceive bodybuilding outside of the phone. And so you're missing out. You literally could be shooting yourself into the foot if you don't buckle down and say, you know what, I'm going to tackle the hard exercises that aren't sexy, that aren't that fun, and just bust your ass. Right, absolutely.
Exactly. Like
and
you said,
it can be done. So go ahead. Sorry.
Like what you said about the some of the mental aspect is a point that I made before is like, especially with new guys, you need to have, I call them this mental health sets. Like, forget a stimulus, forget all that. Just go in there and use this set to like work on your mental like strength. And I think that's something that you can pull from bodybuilding and all that. That is so valuable. Like, just like look at the look at the weight that you're about to do, look at the machine, and be like, I'm just going to put my all into this. And I think that bleeds over into so many aspects of your life, because if you're always trying to like go into this, like, RPE and all, keeping rep in reserve and all that kind of stuff is awesome. I think it has application, but it's like there are times that I think you just need to go in there and be like, I will not leave a ounce on this set. That's something my coach always would preach about. Justin Y, he's a bodybuilder. You may know him. He's like, you never get the setback. You will never get like that setback. And I think if you approach that set that way, you'll start approaching like your days that way. You'll wake up and you're like, I never get this day back. Not to get too super philosophical with bodybuilding and everything, but it's like if you adopt that principle in your training, that will bleed into every, like it has for me. It's like another principle of that is like how you do anything is how you do everything. It's like how I made my bed. If I just threw the sheets on, it looked like shit. My training later is probably going to reflect that. People may not think that connection is there, but it'll what's the word? It'll come up. It'll come back, and it's like
carries over.
It carries over.
Yeah, Jordan Peterson talks about cleaning your room. You probably have heard him speak of that. Yeah.
There's just so much mental, like, people think of bodybuilding, they're just like, oh, get on stage, eat, whatever. But it's like there's so many mental things that you pull from bodybuilding. Like, I've only done this for like seriously for like 2 years. Like I started training when I was like 16 for football and stuff, but like bodybuilding specifically for like 2 years. And it's like, yeah, I've made some cool physical gains, but you can't really make too many crazy gains in just 2 years. But it's like the mental things and the just personal development that you get from bodybuilding is what is so cool, because it's carried over into my life, like how I've matured as a person, how I've like carried myself in my business. And it's like, I think that is something that people getting into bodybuilding need to understand, that like that's where like the money is at, in my opinion. It's like they get on social media, they see, because what social media is going to push to you is like the 1%ers, the 1% physiques, the 1% this, whatever. And it's like that's what,
or the impossible beyond 1%. Like some of it's just it's not even real.
And then it's like they that's what they're aiming for. People getting into, like people my age or whatever, they're getting into that for that crazy physique, that just whatever. But it's like no one really talks about it, and no one ever really aims for like, I really hope bodybuilding like transforms my brain or transforms my habits. And like that's what it's done for me. It's like all my like before I was just a young kid, whatever, but it's like bodybuilding has taught me just so many things. So with that, like what is one thing that bodybuilding for you has changed in a mental state that you think is like one of the most important things?
Before I answer that, I to help orient people, because it's difficult. I'm so happy to hear you say what you just said, that you get it in that way. And I sort of think of it, there's a spectrum along which someone can be. At one end, there's what the general public typically thinks of when they think bodybuilder: extremely narcissistic, superficial, materialistic. All they want to do is look really, really good. And the question that someone posed, or like that first came across my my perspective a few years ago, is like, how many people would keep on training if social media vanished. If like literally there's no, like how many would people? So I think it's important for listeners to orient themselves. At the one end, there's like, if I never had to train and I could just look awesome, I would take that. I don't want to do any, I'd rather have absolutely no effort, no expenditure, no nothing. Just make me look badass all the time. Mm-hmm. Purely sort of superficial. And then at the other end, there are people, I think you're more at this end too. I think I am too. Although the bodybuilding metric of having the carrot dangling that you were chasing after was important, but there was never a carrot to be caught. I knew I'd never catch it because there's always someone with a better physique. For me, it was the intrinsic value of the activity itself.
Beautiful,
testing yourself and seeing what you're made of, testing your metal over and over again, that then does absolutely, utterly carries over. When you've gone through a quadruple or a 5-stage drop set on squats, right? Then everything else in life becomes much more easy, right?
Or like a hard prep,
a hard prep. And there's just that. It's like, okay, let's do this so everything else feels easier. But you're also developing your mind in a way that it's actually, there's more and more parallels to martial arts. The older I get, I pay close. And I like I said, the Chinese medicine introduced martial arts, Tai Chi, Qigong to me, not the external martial arts, but the internal martial arts. So no fighting, what have you. But the same thing applies there. Some people go into martial arts because they want to be a badass and kick people's butt, right? And then the other people who go into martial arts who in no way, shape, or form would ever want to actually have a street fight with someone. It's not about that whatsoever. So the listeners, I think it's important to say, be realistic. Where are you, right? Do you want to look good so you can pick up chicks? There's nothing wrong with that, right?
Right.
But just know that that's what you're doing, and then figure out where you're on that spectrum, and say, you know what, I never thought about it from this perspective. The more superficial you are, so to speak, or the more you're worried about just the outward appearance, the less likely that is to be that something that's going to persevere. That will come and go.
I was just thinking to make that point is like whenever the reason that you get into this could be bodybuilding or anything, when you get into it and it's like driven from, like you said, intrinsic motivation, like just you're intrinsically motivated or whatever, that is something that will like sustain for a long time. If what motivates you is the follows, the likes, not that those are like inherently bad, but it's just like if you would want to sustain this for make a career out of it or whatever, it's like those things are going to fade. They can up and leave. Like those followers can up and unfollow you. That girl you're chasing can just up and whatever. But it's like if you just love, like they always say, just love the process of doing it. It's like that is what will carry you for, because like the process, like the weights aren't going to leave. The weights are going to be there. The food is going to be there.
Gravity will always be waiting on you.
Right, seriously. Like the process will always be like there. And it's like if you could just fall in love with that, it's like that's so valuable. Getting into anything,
Yeah.
Getting into anything.
So that would have been one of my answers to your earlier question. I think the thing, I've had various versions and nuanced lessons that I've learned over the years, and especially when I was doing bodybuilding preps. But in general, the main thing I've learned is to have an absolute gratitude for how phenomenally amazing how thankful I should really be for everything I have in life. When you're in a place of difficulty, of pain, right? Like during a prep, when you've been dieting down, you're getting dizzy every once in a while, and you haven't really had a good night's sleep for months on end,
right?
And then you start to bitch and moan and complain, and then you walk past a homeless person, who hasn't eaten maybe for days or hasn't had a good meal for years, and they're living on the streets with their dog, right, begging. You're like, dude, I have absolutely no reason to be whiny because I've chosen to do a bodybuilding diet and I have the resources and the time to go and train and do these things. I am so absolutely lucky to be able to do this. Bodybuilding at the competitive level, at least, it's a luxury It's absolute luxury to be able, in a world especially now, and this is an important point, like I was hoping to be able to make, is that in a modern world with modern conveniences where we drive our car everywhere and we have escalators and we park our car as close as we can to the buildings, and we literally food gets delivered to us. We have Uber Eats, and like literally there's very, very potentially you could live your life without hardly any really difficult physical and or mental challenges. And in a world that's sort of constructed to weaken you in that sense, right? To make you dependent upon those luxuries of modern Western living. Bodybuilding is just one thing, martial arts is another, sports in general, and trying to become the best version of you in that sporting activity or bodybuilding is a possibility to strengthen yourself. Because those things might, I mean, especially with the world today, I don't even get political, but those things might go away at any time. And to build up that resilience, bodybuilding is, because it is so dang difficult, is an opportunity to basically peel away the onions, the layers of the onion, and figure out who you are at your core and make yourself stronger and more resilient for whatever may come your way. So that, you know, let's say, oh, I don't have, my water's turned off for 48 hours. Well, so I've gone through worse, you know. Yeah. I get my car and get some more. It's nothing compared to some of the, in terms of how physically painful or difficult it might be. Life becomes much easier, and you develop this resilience, which has to come through the struggle.
Yeah.
You can't just like, I mean, until we become cyborgs and you can, you know, program those things into your brain where you just feel less pain, or be, you know, you're stimulating your reward center, what have you, electrically. Those things have to come through life's difficulties, and life doesn't give us those opportunities to build resilience, but bodybuilding does. Bodybuilding gives us that possibility.
Did it again.
Yeah. So, yeah. But I wanted to add that as an important, that's a very important thing that gets missed, because the Instagram world around us is rarely focused on that. That's not sexy. Like,
yeah. I wish there was a way to like put on paper like how valuable the mental aspect of it is, because it's like you have like a tangible thing to look at with a physique. You have like physical like numbers in the gym or what have you, or followers or likes. Like those are like tangible things you can show someone, like, hey, here's this. But it's like you can't really put on paper like the mental growth aspect of it. You can't like show them the proof of it. And it's like you have to go through it, mentally and spiritually change or whatever, and then like look back and be like, oh, there's been all this growth. But it's like when you got into it, you had no idea that growth was there have even been made. But it's like I wish you could just like put that on paper and be like, hey, you could have this kind of mental growth, and that would be a little more sexy, I guess, if you could like just put it on paper or whatever. You can do exactly that. You can log it. Yeah, you can write down on a daily basis. Like, there's an very old ancient way of exploring who you are, and simply answering the question every day: who am I? Just who am I? Right? And you might say, I'm a hungry mofo who is really, you know, who's pissed off at his girlfriend or what have you. And the next day you might say, wow, I'm a guy who's really, really thankful that he has the opportunity to bodybuild, that he can pay for all these supplements and all these sorts of things. And I have a nice gym, and I have a car that can get me there. And, you know, I saw this guy, Andrei Smayev, the Russian. You may have seen him online, right? And, you know, he had to walk to the gym through snow, uphill both ways. And, like, it's so much easier for me to train than what he's gone through. I have a much better equipment. Like, so you write those things down. So you can, on a daily basis, literally on paper, reflect upon who you are and the things you're doing. Just a gratitude journal. You can do that during your prep. Journaling is so important, because like I have a couple of journals right here, and I was doing this a few days ago. Was like kind of looking back. This kind of why I made that point, is like looking back and seeing the growth is so cool. Just like having like the little notes that I'd write down, like those little things that bothered me back then. It's like you just said, it's like that doesn't even like faze me now. It's like that's not even like that would happen now. I'm just like, man, that's whatever. But it's like you wouldn't have known that you would gain that kind of mental strength and clarity at the forefront. It's like you have to kind of go through it first to look back and be like, oh, that's the kind of mental growth that I needed essentially. But yeah, it's just there's so many cool mental things that you can pull from bodybuilding that I could talk about it for for so long, just because like it's reflected in like in my ways of like being just an employee, being a son, being like a follower of Christ, and it's like it's just there's so many things it bleeds into that I think not that people should like competitively bodybuild, you know, not everyone wants to get into like the get on stage thing or whatever, but I think everyone should like put themselves through like at least like one prep, like one kind of bodybuilding prep to kind of get like that mental fortitude that they can carry with them for like the rest of their life, you know what I mean? It's just
Yeah, I mean, should is a difficult word, I think.
yeah.
Yeah, if you wish that I know exactly what you're getting at. It would be great if everyone could want to and would initiate going through that process. So from the other side, they could see the rewards. But if you say everyone should do this and you start pushing people in the stuff they don't want to do, then they'll never do it again. Right?
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah, it's got to be the
that's a
thing
good
for
point.
you. Yeah, the world, your
that's
circumstances have to bring you there.
That's a good point. Yeah, that's a good point. So Scott, I got one final question. I know I kind of sent you like an overview, but that was just kind of like I was like I'm just gonna have some questions that I ask him, and then we can just like shoot the shit from there and just figure it out from there. But I do have one final question I want to ask you that I'm going to kind of like implement at the end of every podcast. I'm sure you've seen podcasts that do. They have like one final question, one big bang. So,
all right,
I'm sure you could probably even guess what it is. But how do you, Scott, Mr. or Dr. Scott Stevenson, how do you want to be remembered whenever your time comes? Like, how do you want to be remembered in bodybuilding, in life, and everything?
Yeah, you did send this question. I just want to be remembered as a guy that did his best to try to make all the people around him the best version, help them to make themselves the best versions of themselves that they can be. That's through teaching, that's through just philosophizing, that's through giving information that may or may not want to be taken on. But teaching, I thought I'd say it again, I'd like to teach people how to fish so they can become the best fishers that they could be, and not just give them fish. There's a huge difference. There are very few fishing teachers these days, it seems like, and there's lots of people handing out fish.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a really good point. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good point. Well, sir, this whole podcasting thing is still very new to me, but I think that's all I've got for you.
You're doing a great job, man. Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate it. It's an honor to get to talk to you again. Like, I remember I bought your book, well, I guess probably like 6 months ago now, and I got so many little notes written in there and like squiggles
right
and everything. So I appreciate you taking the time out of your day to come on the podcast. Whenever this gets uploaded or whatever, I'll send it to you. And I really appreciate you taking your time out to come to the podcast, man. I really do.
My pleasure, Maddox. Yeah, this was cool.
Thanks, sir.
Keep going with the podcast. You're doing good stuff.
For sure. Yes, sir. I'll talk to you soon.
All right, brother. Bye.